G'day you mob, and welcome back to the Pouch series that I'm doing with my friends Greg and Jake from the podcast called The Pouch, all about Australian politics. In the next part of this series, we're going to be answering your questions related to Australian politics. So guys, it's an advanced English series here where we are talking naturally, but it is a little bit difficult at times as there are three of us all having a bit of a laugh, having a spontaneous conversation, and we talk over the top of each other, so don't get too stressed out. If you don't hear or understand every single word that we say, the whole point is to be a fly on the wall and practice your listening comprehension when multiple native speakers are having a spontaneous conversation, and at the same time, you're going to be learning about Australia and Australian politics. So guys, without any further ado, tap the Karawong and let's get into it. Well, that sort of dovetails well with some of these questions. The first one from Anand here is, does Australia have corruption politically?
No. I mean, the short answer is...
No, wait. No. I forget. Do we want to suit or not? I forget.
The short answer is that every political system has around the world. You can't find a political system that doesn't have some level of corruption. I would say that the types of corruption that we have, and I to be very, very clear, I don't really personally think of pork barreling as corruption. It's sort of, I mean, it is something that is done as almost a reward for voting for someone, as much as it is a part of a formal program to deliver funds to much needed things.
Well, isn't that any time that any party gives money to anything in a certain seat, trying to get favour from the voters, that's effectively, that could be defined as bribery, right? But that's ultimately how the system works. They have to try and gain favour to get power, so you can't really avoid that when you're responsible for also giving out money and doing good things, but you have that sort of bias, right?
You are right, but I mean, ultimately, any government program should be equitable, and that's sort of what it goes down to. So, anytime that it's not equitable, anytime that it preferences one group over another, in the example. So, I should probably differentiate. I don't necessarily think of pork barreling in general as corruption, but the pork barreling that took place in the so-called sports rort scandal, that's pretty overt. That's where they highly preferenced the Liberal Party and National Party seats, electorates, gave money to their groups over areas that were highly deserving and highly needing of those specific funds.
We do have a little history of corruption in Australia, but it's not sort of like it was. We have had a history in terms of ministers going to jail and all that sort of stuff, and inquiries and things like that. There was in the 1980s in particular. So the Fitzgerald inquiry and the Western Australia Royal Commission. Anyway, that was that they resulted in imprisonment, and according to the article that I'm reading, we have a perception of corruption, which I think sums it up well. We have a perception of corruption. Like if you asked the general public, they would say, yes, our politicians are corrupt. However, we don't necessarily have a lot of evidence about that. In a modern day sense, you've got that pork barreling and those sorts of, I guess, minor corrupt bits and pieces which don't deserve jail time. But we have had a history of corruption, but nowhere near as much as other countries.
The big thing is around public interest disclosure. If I have an interest in a thing, and I could be seen to be favouring that thing that I'm going to explain this in a really poor way. I'm sorry.
Just say that it's challenging their English skills.
Well, so the important thing is that anytime you have an interest in a thing as a parliamentarian, you can't be seen to be promoting that thing that you have an interest in. So the example is the parliamentarian that, for example, might have shares in a mining company that then ensures that mining company is able to go and meet with environmental regulators and have their environmental regulations, quashed or not thought of, essentially. So, and that has happened in the past. It's happened,
Is that
recently.
considered insider trading, or only if the person allowing that to happen or with knowledge of that happening has money invested in the company?
So it's considered corruption. Plain and simple. Essentially, it is. I have an interest that I have not disclosed. So it's one thing to say. It's one thing if I, as a parliamentarian, for example, have shares in a company, and I go ahead and I tell the environment. In that example, I go ahead and I tell both the head of that mining company. Sorry, I just hit my microphone. I go ahead and tell the head of the mining company, as well as I go and tell the parliament, hey, I have interest in this mining company. Therefore, I recuse myself from all discussions on the mining company and how it might get its approvals, etc. It's another thing to facilitate the approvals because of your position of privilege.
There was a few guys doing that, wasn't there, in the news recently?
Stuart Robert was, the guy managing the.
Was it with real estate?
Centrelink.
Yeah,
the robo-debt.
The robo-debt. The guy who's managing the COVID Safe app. He did it. Yeah,
I think there's people like Stuart Robert in our political life who you just wouldn't be surprised if there was something going on. If they came out, you'd be like, yeah, okay, I sort of saw the writing was on the wall there. But it's possible that it's also not there. That it's possible that we're just sort of projecting onto them.
The big thing for me is that I don't want to, leave your listeners with the perception that Australia is an overtly corrupt country, because it's fundamentally not.
Yes.
I think corruption exists in every institution, whether it be a private institution or a governmental or a public institution. I think fundamentally the way that Australia deals with corruption is appropriate. I think we have the appropriate mechanisms. We should have, and maybe down the track we will have a federal version of what some states like New South Wales has the ICAC, yes, essentially an organisation that both investigates and persecutes any time they find corruption, and at some stage we will have a federal version of that. But I feel like,
Jake and I will be starting one if you're in.
This is me, the guy who's been
we've got big plans for the podcast
for a long time. Exactly, we'll be doing the federal ICAC down the track.
Bring it to us.
No,
hard-hitting journalism.
Exactly. I think it works. I think we've got appropriate mechanisms.
Yeah, I don't find it overtly corrupt, but I do know that it exists, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you once again so much for joining me in today's episode. I hope you got a little bit out of this episode and learnt a little bit more about Australia, the Australian political environment, everything like that. And don't forget to go and check out The Pouch, the podcast, where you will be able to listen to episodes released every single week from Jake Farwharton and Greg Savage. These guys are both Australian, and they're very knowledgeable when it comes to all things Australia, but particularly politics. So go and check out the podcast, guys. And until next time, I wish you all the best.